are you?
Good.
Again, I haven't seen you in a while.
And who are you?
My name is Ian MacKaye.
Ian, welcome to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Thank you very kindly.
Now, Ian, right off the bat, I have some gifts for you. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. And because you are agreeing to this interview, I have some Hendrix bootlegs records for you.
I have most of these. In fact, I have all of these. These are all the Curtis Knight things. Thanks. I have these so you can hang on to them.
But I was curious, though, with the songs that are on there, what can you say about some of the songs that are on?
Songs are largely recorded with Curtis Knight. Hendrix, when he was living in New York in the 60s, he signed a contract with a guy named Ed Chalpin, and he, for like $1 or something, and Ed Chalpin had the rights. He basically bought all of Hendrix's rights. He was his manager. Then Hendrix went to England with Chaz Chandler, right, for the Animals, and got the new deal. Once he became a huge success, Ed Chalpin sued because he had this contract, and he was the settlement allowed him to put out these sort of off-brand recordings. These recordings are largely recordings that were done with Curtis Knight. They're sort of R&B things. The quality is not necessarily great. There are a couple of nice tracks. He plays guitar on it, but it's not actually him singing.
You sure you don't have some of these? Because like the Canadian issue. Do you have the Canadian issue?
I don't know if I have the Canadian. I haven't.
Well, you do now.
Okay.
Also, it's interesting because Vancouver, Hendrix's grandmother lived in Vancouver, and so Vancouver has a big, heavy connection.
Yes, I know that. Yeah.
So we're not too far away, actually, from the Hendrix shrine here.
I didn't realize there was one here.
What do you remember, Ian, about the 1991 gig, the Moodyville Moo Moo, that me and Grant Lawrence put on for Fugazi?
I remember it was the first, I think probably the first time, I believe it's the first time Fugazi played in Canada. Maybe we played in Toronto before. But I do remember that you had put on the show. You were an eccentric person. I think Calvin maybe connected us. Is that possible?
Grant Lawrence was talking to Calvin because the International Beat Underground thing was happening at that time.
Underground Pop Festival. And but I think, were you at that?
That's why you're there, to correct me, Ian. I appreciate that.
Were you at the IPU?
No, I didn't go down. I was exhausted from the gig.
Right. But they put this show on. It was in North Vancouver Hockey Arena, I believe. Is that the name of it? North Van
Rec Center.
Rec Center, okay. It was not a good sounding room. I was pretty frustrated with the size of the room. We are interested as a band. We were very interested in having rooms that had compression because we want the people to feel connected. When you have a room that's giant and there's no compression, people often feel disassociated with each other. I think, but on the other hand, we were a band that has a really specific sort of ideas about how we're playing, doing all ages shows or charging certain amounts of money. So we were looking for people who were courageous and visionary enough to find rooms that were off the beaten path. You happened to be that person in Vancouver. I think there were some people in the crowd that were a little unpleasant that night. We had a little bit of friction with them. That was totally common. And
that's actually what I'd like to revisit right now, Ian.
Please do.
I have some clips here I want to play for you, and perhaps maybe you could just comment on some of the stuff that's happening here. But this is actually from the gig. If you want to bend down here, you can actually see.
I can see. Now, you can see now that the sound is not particularly good. There are people dancing. We're playing the song Waiting Room.
At the North Van Rec Center.
In 1991, as produced by Nardwuar, the Human Serviette.
And Grant Lawrence, too. And it was,
in all fairness.
And it was called the Moodyville Moo Moo.
Right.
I remember I had to rent $800 worth of portable toilets for that gig.
That's too bad. Don't they have bathrooms there?
No, we had to get extra toilets for the gig.
Well, thank you for facilitating that.
Now, continuing on here, Ian, does this look like a typical 1991 Fugazi gig?
Yes.
And as we pan back...
That's the size of the room. It's a big room.
It was a hockey rink.
How many people could that room hold, do you think? 5,000?
5 or 10, yeah.
Maybe how many people are there? 500?
Like 1,300, 1,600.
All right, so
something's happening here.
Probably a disturbance. Are you filming this?
No, my friend Bill Wallen is. I actually also ran to see what was happening. You can see me in the corner there. But here is the cameraman trying to find out what's going on.
Pretty typical Fugazi show in the late 80s, early 90s. What is the point? What are we doing here?
We're just analyzing this because interesting stage banter from you, Ian.
It's pretty commonplace for the time. I don't have, there were some people fighting at the show. We don't play music when people are fighting. I'm not interested in performing music while people are hurting other people. So we stopped. People were yelling at us. We were talking back at them. For instance, if right now someone was to run in here and attack you with a billy club, I would try to put a stop to it. It's the same concept, except in this case, there's 1,300 people. But by stopping playing, we're encouraging people we're trying to remove some of the tension in the situation. I'm a very dry humor. My humor is very dry, and it makes people very angry. I think these people are angry with me. But I don't care, because I'm not interested in people hurting other people. See? Now I'm being facetious. That's my humor.
Well, there we have it. Fugazi 1991, Ian, reliving it. The Subhumans keg cooler story. I had asked you about this before. Could you explain a bit of background on it? The Subhumans played Washington, D.C.
Yeah. I saw the documentary, was a little teaser for the Vancouver. Was it Vancouver?
Bloody But Unbowed, a movie about punk in Vancouver. Yes, it did, by Suzanne Tabata.
Great. I'd like to see it someday. But I remember seeing an interview piece with them, and the way they recalled it was so interesting to me, because it was not the way I recall it, but this is the way most history is. Do you want me to tell you the story of that particular show?
Yeah, exactly. What did they say and then what happened? Something about a keg cooler.
There was, in Washington, D.C., there's a neighborhood called Georgetown. And Georgetown is a home of a lot of very rich people. And there was one house was like an estate, a giant house, and there was a high school girl who went to a school called Madeira. Madeira is a very exclusive private school. She was friends with somebody who was in this band Iron Cross. And she said, hey, I'm having this I'm graduating, we're having a graduation party at my school, and then afterwards we're going to have a party at our house. Does your band want to play? And he said, yeah, sure, Iron Cross. So at that time, if you were in a young DC punk band, as soon as you got a gig, you just invited everybody else to come play the show, because we all shared equipment. So he said, hey, we got this show, everyone should come play. So Minor Threat, Red Sea, SOA,
Subhumans.
They weren't playing. No, they were there. I don't think they played. They were in town. They played in town. But so because the graduation, we got there early, right? Because they were at their graduation thing. It was an after graduation party. So we said they'll be home. We'll be there at 10. Let's all get there at 8, and we'll have a show, because there was a PA, and there was we had the room. And we just went there. And the people, her parents or whoever were there, just thought it was part of the party, even though their child and her friends were not there. So Subhumans were there as well. They were in town.
The party's house, though, was it a senator house? Was it somebody involved in politics?
No, but it was maybe politics, somebody who was very well off, well-heeled. They had, staff, right? So they had a keg cooler set up. And it was plugged into the only available outlet. So we need to plug in the PA. We need one more outlet. So we unplugged the cooler and plugged in the PA, and we had the show. The kids, the private school kids, were not there. They hadn't come back from their graduation. We were having a show. We were having our own show in this house. Then they came back in the middle of all the action, and they saw the keg cooler had been unplugged, so they unplugged the PA while we were playing, and they plugged in the keg cooler. So then we unplugged the keg cooler and plugged in the PA, and it went back and forth until we got into basically fisticuffs. And then it was just running, fighting with these private school kids and running around and then bailing. I remember the Subhumans being there because they're big guys and they were kind of scary guys. And I remember the high school kids who were getting up in our face. They were scared of them dudes.
The Subhumans finished the beer, because they were saying that they were eating the beer and drinking the beer.
Yeah, they were drinking the beer. But I think I think the thing I saw was them talking about all those straight edge kids, they were freaked out when we were drinking beer. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. A lot of people in Washington were heavy drinkers too. It wasn't just the Canadians. So I don't think it was that much of an issue. But it was a pretty funny night. I remember Henry got there late, because at that time, we both worked, I think it was, Henry was working at the ice cream store, so he had to come after work. So he arrived, and it was already everything had gone into craziness. So he just like ran in the middle of it, and then we all just ran off, and it just bailed, grabbed our gear and split, and they had their party.
Did you ever do a party like that again?
Did I?
A senator's house, a well-off house. Was that one and off?
I think it's pretty much. We didn't play a lot of parties because I didn't like wrecking people's houses, and I'm not into vandalism, so I think I always felt a little weird about doing shows in people's houses.
Ian, back to Washington, D.C., what can you tell the people about your favorite scene, the go-go scene? Not necessarily Trouble Funk, but some of the other bands like Chuck Brown and EU.
And you say it's my favorite scene because why?
Because you played one of your last gigs with Minor Threat with Trouble Funk. You love the funk, right?
I have a deep, abiding respect for go-go. Go-go is a form of music that is indigenous and really specific to the D.C. area. It doesn't really get much outside the Beltway. It's been going on for almost 40 years now. I can remember the first time I heard something was a Trouble Funk song. I was with Henry driving in a car, and we heard this song, Pump Me Up by Trouble Funk. We heard it, and we just pulled over like, this is such cool music. And they said it was Trouble Funk, and we asked around. They said, yeah, it's a local band. I talked to HR from the Bat Brains, and I said, what do you know about Trouble Funk? He's like, oh, that's old. That's old go-go. Like, go-go's already, that's old. And he was like 2 years old at that point. And he was talking about this band, Junkyard Band, who played on trash cans.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, the Junkyard Band, because there's a bit of confusion with the Minor Threat history in Junkyard. Maybe you can clarify that at all. There's your Junkyard, and then there's the Junkyard Band, right?
Are you confused by it?
No, I thought it was kind of interesting, though, because some of the guys from your band,
Brian Baker,
turned into Junkyard, right?
from Los Angeles.
From Los Angeles, and here's the Junkyard Band from Washington, D.C.
The same word is being used.
Yes, exactly.
I see that. Okay.
But it's from Washington, D.C., which is fascinating to me. I love that.
The band Junkyard is not from Washington, D.C.
This Junkyard is from Washington, D.C.
Yes, they are. And this is, but to Def Jam, Rick Rubin signed them. This is kind of like one of the moments where they thought like go-go's going to finally break out. But it's weird because it can't really break out. There's still go-go bands playing to this day. And this is interesting. Now, like there's not really records, but if you go online, all these young go-go bands post videos of themselves rehearsing. And it's like there's hundreds of them. These very obscure bands, all these kids and their friends in like these rec rooms rehearsing, and that's their output. That's the thing they put out. It's a really interesting development. Go-go is a really fascinating form of music, I think.
Did you ever see the Junkyard Band? Because originally that was kids, right?
I saw them a number of times, yeah. They were kids and they grew up.
What was the setup when they were kids, though? Like when you saw them?
They're called they were what was called a bucket band. So they used white paint buckets usually, and they would turn them over, maybe put them in shopping carts, because shopping carts rattle. So they kind of create a little bit of, so they would bang on these white paint buckets, and then you can hear the sound of a shopping cart. They kind of shh. There'd maybe 6 kids playing on buckets, and then maybe upside down trash cans, plastic trash cans, and then a couple of dudes doing the call and response singing. But really, now with this incredible internet, I would encourage people to go look it up and they can hear it for themselves. Junkyard in later years had a more traditional format. Fugazi played a show at Junkyard. We played with him at a small community center in Silver Spring, Maryland. And setting up that show was very interesting because one thing about go-go is that these bands are very neighborhood-based, a lot of these bands. So, and DC has there's a lot of different areas in the city. And so if a band is, say, from Northeast or Southeast or from Lincoln Heights or from Petworth or Anacostia, that those bands attract kids from that particular area. So they can't play in another area because it's bad blood. So when we were setting up the show with Fugazi and Junkyard, and I was talking to their manager, the hardest thing was finding neutral ground, a place that we could play in which the fact that they were playing didn't offend the people around them. Like, in other words, Junkyard, who were from Anacostia, couldn't play a show at the Clifton Terrace Boys Club because the Clifton Terrace crew would descend upon the joint. Do you understand? So it was a very interesting process when we found a neutral spot in this rec center out in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is just outside the city. Another thing interesting about a lot of go-go bands is they will not play unless they're paid. And that is totally contrary to the Fugazi. We didn't get paid for a show since 1989 on. We were never paid a dime for a single show in Washington, D.C. Every show is either a free show outdoors or is a benefit for something. So when we wanted to do the show, it was a benefit for a group that was dealing with parents of, I think it was, actually it was WISH, I think it was Washington Inner City Help, and it was working with kids who were at risk. And we were doing a benefit for them, and so, but to get Junkyard to play with us, they were like, we need to get paid. It's just because they have been, I think the point is that a lot of bands have been taken advantage of, so they just have a rule of thumb that we must be paid. And we finally negotiated with them a way to do this, because we thought, like, we're paying for the PA, or we're not getting paid, we're the draw, so we kind of feel like we can't really, in good faith, can't pay you. But they finally decided that they would do is that they would play, some of them would play with us, and then they would all join the rest of them and play another show. They would get paid that night, just not the particular show we were playing.
In Winnipeg, Manitoba, Minor Threat. Do you remember the gig there where somebody threw a railway flare onto the dance floor?
That does sound familiar. Yeah. Winnipeg was in that hall. We played on that tour. We played Winnipeg, and we played a place called 10-Foot Henry's in Calgary. The show in Winnipeg was much more of like a weird theater hall, and there's a video of it. Were you heard about this? The flare? Did you see it in the video?
I was told about the flare by the.
I don't remember the flare exactly. Can I put these down?
Oh yes, please go ahead. I was told about the flare by the author of this book on SNFU, and this is another gift for you, Ian. Hopefully you'll take this.
I will take this.
And this is by Chris Walter, and he saw you with Minor Threat in Winnipeg, and he wrote this book about SNFU, and SNFU loved you guys, as you can see. Minor Threat T-shirt right there. Did you ever encounter SNFU at all?
Of course, yeah, I saw them. They're a great band.
Did you ever play with them with Fugazi or Minor Threat?
I think Minor Threat did play with them. I certainly saw them, but at the moment I can't recall if we played with them.
So the Winnipeg show, the flare went off, but the show went off. You were happy with it?
It was a good show, yeah.
And the Calgary, Alberta one, what about that show? What was that like?
That was small and pretty crazy. There's a very well-known, or I think somewhat infamous, punk house. It was like a skater house in Calgary. It appears in Another State of Mind, the film, and we stayed at that house, and it was pretty great. They were nice, really nice kids.
Have you had any instances of that? I know Jello has had that before, where bands have taken images and it has come back to haunt them. Have you had that in your experience with Discord at all?
I mean, in terms of litigious, sort of, no. No.
How do you clear all the stuff?
We don't.
But how about other stuff do you have to clear? Like some of the photos you've taken. Like, for instance, I noticed, like, for the Discord stuff, you're always crediting on the Discord ads, who took the photo and stuff.
That's not a legal issue. That's just an etiquette.
And you've never had any problem with any of the people looking for photos or anything like that?
Being angry about us using their photo? No. Why would we?
Just curious, because I guess other labels have encountered that.
Yeah, but we're Discord. We don't do fucked up things. I'm not saying that they do. I'm just saying that it's just like we've never had an issue with that. I mean, there's been the only issue I can think of. Can I put your book down?
Yeah, sure.
In 1990 something, 96 maybe, we were there's a band from DC called Scream, and we were reissuing their 2 albums on a CD. Actually, they had 4 records. We're going to do 2 CDs. And we received a cease and desist from a company called Hollywood Records. They had signed a band called The Scream, and they sent us a cease and desist saying they had the rights to the name. But this was 12 to 15 years after we had put out the Scream stuff, so clearly we had first use. There's no question about that, right? Because 1981 is before 1995. So I said to the guy, he called, and I called the number. We got the cease and desist fax, and I called him, and I said, no. He said, you can't put this out. We have a band. We've been promoting. We spent $500,000 promoting them. We don't want people to be confused. And I said, yeah, okay. Well, I'm not worried about it. I think these are very different bands. Now, the issue really was that the last record, with the last later era Scream, the drummer was Dave Grohl. And Dave Grohl was in Nirvana, right? And this guy was scared because he thought that we were trying to, he was worried that there would be, we would basically be pulling sales from them, that they've been promoting the Scream, and somehow Scream with Dave Grohl was, going to somehow affect their sales.
I think it would help them.
Maybe. I mean, I thought it was ridiculous. So he said to me, we don't, you can't put that out. And I said, we've already made them. I said, and we're only doing these CDs. They're not going to sell that many. They didn't sell that many records to begin with. I said, we're just making a CD of records that already exist. We're going to put, and he said, well, we're just worried about people being confused. The consumers will be confused. I said, well, I'm not worried about it, so we can all rest. I think you can rest. He said, well, we think you should put a sticker on the front of your CD saying from Washington, D.C. But we'd already made and distributed these records. So I wasn't going to recall them to put these stickers on. So I said to him, I know, the onus is upon you. We have first use. Why don't you put stickers on saying from L.A.? And he says, yeah, that's probably the way it should happen. It's not the way it's going to happen. And I said, well, what can I say? And he says, let me explain something to you. He says, Hollywood Records is a division of Disney. Disney is a multi-billion-dollar company with an on-staff legal wing. He says, we will sue you. He said, we will take you to court, and you might be right, but you will be broke long before you can ever prove it. I said, okay, I'll talk to my friend. I have a lawyer who's like a friend who just had become a lawyer. I said, what do you think? He's like, and he was like, let's triple sue. I was like, I don't want to, no lawsuits, not interested in any of that kind of thing. As it turned out, The Scream hated their name. And they changed their name. It had nothing to do with us whatsoever. They changed their name, and then they broke up. So it was a moot point. But this actual interaction was pretty much, it was the only time we ever had any kind of really serious litigious stuff. That's it.
Ian, winding up here.
Did I bore you?
No, I love that. I love little tidbits of information. It's awesome. I really appreciate your time, Ian. Thank you for taking it. Kristen Stewart, I asked you about this before, her wearing the Minor Threat shirt. I actually wanted to get you to comment on that before. What was that all about? Remember Kristen Stewart?
Yeah, she was doing a biopic about Joan Jett or the Runaways. Is that correct? I never saw the movie. I think part of what was going on, she was trying to be in character. Joan, of course, was an advisor or a consultant to the set. Joan is a big Minor Threat and Fugazi fan, and I think she encouraged her to wear the shirt. I was surprised by I don't know why it makes a difference if someone wears a shirt. I was surprised the amount of excitement about that or the amount of chatter. I don't get it. To me, it was just, I didn't think twice about it. Like, okay, she's wearing a shirt. But it was very strange. People picked up on it.
And apparently it was like Joan Jett gave her a bunch of shirts to wear, and that was one of them. That's what I heard.
Okay, that sounds right. You sound like you already know.
Well, I'd asked you, but I hadn't had a chance to ask you in person.
Yeah, I think, Joan, she's a friend, nice person, really nice person, and she's a fan. It was nice of her, yeah.
And I'm a fan of all your stuff too, Ian.
Thank you.
And I actually collect some stuff related to you.
Yes.
And I was wondering, I have a gift for you, and again, I'm not sure if you already have this or not, but this Mitch Clem, Nothing Nice to Say.
I think I've seen this.
Because that is a bit of an Ian illusion, is it not?
What do you think?
Well, I do. I mean, I thought maybe I was,
This is a not a parody, but a riff on the cover of the Salad Days record. It's a photo taken by Glenn Friedman in 1983. This is the front porch of Discord House. This would be me. That would be Jeff. That would be Lyle. That would be Brian. Is that a beer? Whatever. Yeah. Okay.
That's from Mitch Clem too. Nothing Nice to Say.
I don't know Mitch Clem.
He's a great cartoonist.
Yeah, it looks good. I do think I've seen this. Is this a gift?
Yes, that is a gift.
I will take this. I will put this in my collection. There's many riffs on this. I've many times come out of the house and there'll be 4 people I don't know sitting in this position on my front porch.
Ian, anything else you want to add to the people out there at all?
Let me think. Well, I didn't enter into this wanting to add anything to begin with. So I don't really have anything to...
Or should I rephrase this? Thank you for your time, Ian. I really appreciate you talking to me for this interview.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks much, Ian MacKaye. Keep on rocking in the free world. And doot, doodaloo, doo.
Doot, doot.